Howdy folks, good afternoon, how are y'all doing? It is Tuesday, August 17th, 2021, and this is going to be a bit of an interpretive video, but then at the same time this is going to be a reminder and a little bit of a sad video as well, emotional. So I'm over at Stump Pass and noticed that the parking lot seemed rather empty, but then came to find out that there was a sign that said red tide was present. Now, unfortunately, we are seeing death, from all of this fish washed up ashore. And this is very real, my good mates. And boy, is it so depressing. Going out in nature, it's like, I don't want to show you guys any of this. But yet, considering my role, I can't be silent about it either. I have to show it. Just so that it is indeed real. So, for those of you who are not familiar with what the red tide is, well, as a big sum, the red tide describes a harmful algal bloom. So what that basically means is the red tide is formed by a particular algae called Karenia brevis, and essentially that is what makes up this red tide. Now, the thing is, algae, in the food chain, algae's all the way at the bottom. It is essentially one of the primary producers that is found within a food chain. Think of algae as an equivalent to our trees on land, but instead in the water. Now, what happens is, red tide is actually a naturally occurring algal bloom. It is indeed. But the thing is, as mankind, we've done certain things to exacerbate the algal bloom itself. So algae in general, or specifically Karenia brevis, they need nutrients in the form of nitrates and phosphates. Now, with that being said, if nutrients were at a normal level, the red tide wouldn't be as prevalent as it is, or as it was back in 2018. Now, and that makes the point of Florida doesn't have a algae problem. It has a nutrient pollution problem. And that's a big difference. So what happens is, if there's too much nutrients, that is only going to cause more of the algae to feed on those nutrients. And so when the algae gets more than what they need to survive, they're going to continue to reproduce. And thus, that's how the red tide in Florida, especially on the Gulf, can sometimes grow so large, even as big as cities. And typically what the red tide does, or the Karenia brevis to be specific, they need oxygen just as we do. And typically, when the algae feed on these nutrients, as well as the microbes that are within an area, that'll make a particular region of water absent in oxygen. And another term for that is known as the dead zone. And so, with there being a dead zone in which there's no oxygen in the water whatsoever, all the other marine life is going to suffer. Because, in a sense, they can't receive the amount of oxygen that they need to sustain themselves. So in a sense, in the water, they suffocate. And thus, eventually, they will die. Think of it as us being out in space, where there's no oxygen. Essentially, something similar happens to them, to our homies. And this is only fish. You know, they could, I don't even want to really talk about the other marine life that can be affected. Just because it's depressing, you guys. I mean, it's gone clear up to the manatees, too. I mean, and that, you know, manatees, that brings up a whole nother subject. But that's the thing, these nutrients that I was speaking of, a lot of these nutrients that I talk about comes from fertilizers, pesticides, human waste, animal waste, anything that has to do with organic material. But not all organic material is bad. But with us humans, especially down here in Florida, how people really like their green lawns, well, since people use so much of these fertilizers that typically contains glyphosate, Roundup, which has nitrates and phosphates, the excess has to go somewhere, especially after a rainstorm. And so, eventually, it just makes its way into the Gulf. Because as I said, it has to go somewhere, the excess. And, you know, despite how dreadful this sounds and depressing, there are solutions. One of them is, a matter of fact, you can actually clean up after your pets, for instance. You know, your dogs or even your cats, if they do their number 2 or 1 outside, clean up after them. Another solution is, instead of just trying to always aim for the green lawns, try planting some native gardens. You know, native flowers, trees, or even food. I think, me personally, that adds more beauty to your property. Because you're also supporting the diversity of wildlife in Florida, whether it be mammals, birds, or even butterflies too. I mean, that's just naming a couple of different groups of animals. Or species, I should say. But then the third one. This has been my favorite so far. So for those of you who have followed my content for quite some time, I'm a very close accomplice to Garrett Stewart, also known as Captain Planet, who runs the Eco Preservation Project. Good man. He actually considers me to be one of his interns, or mentees, and for that I am extremely grateful. We do look like brothers. But on the subject of Garrett, he actually works in close consultation with Ocean Habitats, led by one David Wolf. And with this collaboration, Garrett helps install these artificial mini reefs under docks, just as long as they don't obstruct waterway. That way there's no permits required. So what these artificial mini reefs do is they can filter up to 30,000 gallons of water a day. A day, you guys. Not a week, not a month, each day. And these artificial mini reefs tend to host various numbers of species, whether it be crabs, snook, or all kinds of fishes, and even tunicates, and also our ascidians as well. Those are all filter feeders, which feed on these nutrients of nitrates and phosphates, which exacerbates this red tide, as we have seen. Unfortunately, many businesses, whether it be restaurants, marinas, or even households, they've been stepping up to the plate and actually providing a means of a solution of reducing the nutrient pollution problem down here in Florida. Now it's a matter of getting them all around here. Sometimes that's all it takes, is the baby steps. But those baby steps eventually all add up to create the big sum, you guys. So, for those of you who may be interested in placing an order or even a donation for these artificial mini reefs, you can actually go to my mentor's website and you can actually place this order and donation for these mini reefs. And you don't even have to live in the state either. So I'm just saying, you guys, there's solutions too that you can place so that problems like this do not have to happen. Because for the red tide to be this detrimental, it's not normal. So I'm just saying, you guys, if you really want to make a difference, that is something you can do. So alrighty, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and please feel free to share this as well. Then also helping Garrett make a difference as well. It's truly a privilege to be involved with his work and being a friend. So, I'll provide a link to his website for the artificial mini reefs, and I may even provide a couple of articles that talks a bit about the red tide. But I may have to do a separate video on it, discussing any symptoms or even more specific about the algae itself. This was kind of just a general overview, as it were. So forgive me for the length, but I really had to say something about it this time, since I'm actually seeing it. So hope you guys get something out of this. Enjoy your Tuesday, and once again, Journey on a Journey is outwards. Take care, folks, and let's make a difference. Take care, you guys.